Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to Commute Talk. It is Friday, finally. Um, Not that the week was that bad or anything, it's just nice when it's Friday. And I hope you're feeling the same wherever you are. So, today, Zane writes in asking about when I'm working on Serenity and I get stuck, what do I do? Like, what are my resources if I need to learn about some new concept? Um, and he says that when he's working on something and he knows what to do, then it's pretty easy. But if he doesn't know how to do something or doesn't know what to do, then it's harder. Uh, and I mean, yeah, I agree with that. Um, and he also says that an operating system is so big, and there are so many things that he doesn't know, so it's hard to make progress, I guess. So thank you, Zane, for sending the question. It's a good question. And in my case, what I tend to do if I get stuck is I turn exactly what you said. I try to turn that into a strength or a benefit of the project. So an operating system is indeed gigantic. And if I don't know how to do something, I might just go and do something else for a while because there are so many things to do in an operating system. And I guarantee you that there's always at least one thing you can do. And I find that when you're working on stuff, it's good to always be switching between stuff that you know how to do and stuff that you're not quite sure how to do, and sort of weave them together so that you do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Because working on something where you don't know how to solve it, where you don't know, you're not very familiar with the concepts, it's kind of draining, you know? And whereas working on something where you know how to do it, it's more like you're just banging out the code, right? And it's good to mix those because it's almost like stress and then relaxation, and then stress and relaxation. You got to mix those, or you don't have to mix those, but if you do, I think you can get more out of both kinds of period because the stressful period builds up the tension of like not being in your comfort zone, but then you release it and go relax with something you know how to do. And if you do this, at least in my case, I'm not sure this applies to everyone, but for me, I find that it gives me a much higher average throughput, and it keeps things interesting as well. So, for instance, I was going pretty hard with the browser hacking for a while there, like doing them almost every day for 3 weeks in a row, right? And there was a lot of stuff I know how to do in there, but I made sure to always mix in a little bit of stuff I don't know how to do, like doing layout, for instance. Like I was very, very unsure how to do anything layout related when I started working on the lib.html. So, but I knew very well how to do all of the DOM stuff, how to do the CSS stuff. All of that was very, very familiar in my brain, but the layout, not so much. So I was able to mix those two things a little back and forth and make good progress. But now it came to a point where I decided I wanted to start doing the IDE. So of course, here's something that I have no idea how to do because I've never done anything like it. So there's a lot of unknown territory in here. And I do feel that it is more stressful to work on this new project because it's just I haven't worked on anything like it, so I'm not familiar with what data structures you would normally use or how you would represent, say, like a project in memory or what kind of metadata you want and stuff like that. Like I don't know. I don't have anything to refer to, and I don't go in looking at other code because I don't want to, because it's more fun to try to solve things by myself first. But yeah, so it is more stressful at the moment, the new series, and that's why I'm gonna want to fold in some of the old series and some stuff, like have a little bit of breathing room with some comfort zone hacking. But I find that it's it's also important to be able to decompose, like even if you're working on an already decomposed subtask of something, you can usually decompose that further into sort of comfort zone programming and outside of comfort zone programming, and maybe even edge of comfort zone programming. And if you can sort of mix those so that you do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you're always like stepping in and out of your comfort zone, then I think, in my experience, you can keep going for longer, because when you step back in the comfort zone after being outside it for a bit, then it rejuvenates you, and it sort of replenishes your confidence in yourself and your abilities, and in your in your ability to move forward. Now, when it comes to building something that I don't know how to build, you asked about resources. So my main resource is my experience. And I think that for anyone who's been programming for more than a couple of years, that is probably their main resource as well. Or at least it could be, and you could have a great benefit from making it your main resource. Because I know there are a lot of people who defer to like Stack Overflow and Google and stuff like that immediately when they have a problem, and you can go your whole life programming like that, and it's okay. But I really do feel that if I consult my experience first, even if the answer is not perfect, or if it's not like the computer science canon or whatever, I find that it's much easier for me to build if I'm drawing on my own experience rather than always trying to incorporate some glue from Stack Overflow or some tape from Google or whatever into my design. And there's this great thing where if you build something using only your own knowledge and only your own experience at first, then once you get that thing working, even if it's not perfect, then you understand it so much better than if you were taking in patches and pieces from random places, right? If you were not doing copy-paste programming. And then once you have something that works, that you understand well, then your ability to relate that to someone else's design is so much better, because you understand your design and you'll be able to understand its flaws so much better when you hear about someone else's, because then instead of reading about like a new thing that you're not familiar with, you're instead reading about something that accomplishes the same goal as your thing, but it is just different in some ways. So I try to always end up in that position when I build something new, and I'm doing that with the IDE now too, where I'm just trying to build based on things that I know, things I can figure out from first principles, using the data structures that I already have, and trying to assemble things. But in my mind, when I'm building the development environment now, basically I'm just thinking about, well, what does a development environment usually do? And my only knowledge is from the GUI layer, like I know how to interact with them. So I just try to recreate that sort of, and then work backwards to the different classes and functions and stuff that we're going to need. And I think you can do that with anything, really. Like, as long as you have some handle on what you're trying to do, whether it's like your experience with the concept as a user, or if you've read about it or whatever, but you just need some handle, and then you can go from that. So, I mean, a lot of people ask me often about, like, what tutorials do you recommend, or like, what books do you recommend? And I never know what to say, because I don't particularly like tutorials, and I don't really read books. I think these things can be good when you're starting out, and you don't have any clue how to do something. But in my experience, I just really prefer, instead of a tutorial, I would just have a small working example, and then I can just take that and mess around with it. Like, my favorite kind of documentation for a library or something like that is a sample file that does something with the library, because then I can just take that and look at it and then move everything around and mess around with it, and just like do the same thing in my code and see what happens. And I don't know. I find that so much easier to integrate into my brain than reading prose about how something works. But everyone's different, right? And what works for me might not work for you. But that's just whenever people ask me for tutorials and books, that's how I always feel. Like I don't know. I'm not that type of learner, really. I'm a practical learner. Like I learn by doing. So I guess it would be really nice if people would recommend some tutorials and books so that I would have some on hand, because I know that people who ask for these things, they would probably benefit from them. And I know about some, like how to write your own operating system tutorials and that type of thing. But by no means do I have a library of recommendations. And for those of you who are practical learners, of course, my tip is to just get your hands dirty. You know, if you want to start from scratch, then start from scratch. And if you don't know how to do that, then take something that is very small and then mess around with it and build on top of that. And the less you know, the less you know about something, the bigger seed you need, right? So if you don't know anything, then you can mess around on top of a Linux system. But if you're kind of comfortable with operating system concepts, then you can grab like a smaller kernel. And if you're really, really comfortable, you can grab just like a simple bootloader that puts you into C or something, and you can just take it from there. Or if you're like at the extreme comfort level, like I was, having worked on x86 emulator for years and years and years, you don't really need a C to get started. You can just start from your own experience. And I guess I should clarify also that when I talk about starting from my own experience, I'm referring to like the whole thing. So every concept that I know about, every data structure that I know about, and honestly, I don't know that many data structures that well by heart. So I do tend to build things with vectors and hash maps. Like I know I say that often, but I really mean that because those are my go-to things for everything. I tend to think that you can solve 99% of computer problems with vectors and hash map, or programming problems, I should say. Might not be efficient, but you can make it work. Yeah. So I guess those are my thoughts about this. Got a little carried away there, but I really do believe in the benefit of setting yourself up so that you're programming from your own experience and weaving in new experiences gradually by switching in and out of your comfort zone. And when you don't know how to do something, like one thing that I do, which is really beneficial to me, is that I record myself programming. And I understand that not everybody wants to record themselves programming or post it online. There are all sorts of reasons why you wouldn't do that, why you wouldn't want to do that. I was extremely intimidated by the whole concept when I started, and I felt really awkward, but I just tried recording myself a couple of times anyway, and ended up just posting it to YouTube. And I find that recording myself really, really helps me to push forward, even though I feel like something is, there's like a lot of friction in something. So if I start to feel like I'm grinding, or if I get to a little bit of a halt or stop, if I get stuck somehow a little bit, then the fact that I'm recording makes me push myself just that tiny little extra bit needed to break out of that out of that comfort zone thought of like, oh, I'll just give up and come back later, or I'll just look up how to do this online or whatever, because I know that what I ultimately want to do for my own sake and for the sake of my future self becoming a better programmer is to learn, not to like copy paste something that already works. So I find a lot of motivation for that last mile of motivation in recording videos. I'm sure that other people could find that last mile somewhere else, because I'm sure you know this feeling when you're working on something and you feel like you almost got it figured out, but then you hit some roadblock that's just a little too hard or a little too heavy, and you just, frick this, right? And you walk away, you rage quit, and then you come back a week later and do a do-over. And it's good to find what works for you, to help you push through that in the moment, instead of delaying the process for a week if you can. At least it's something that's been hugely awesome for me. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you to everyone who tunes in to watch me programming, because it really does help me program. The fact that you guys hang out and you watch the stuff and you comment, and makes me hold myself to a slightly higher standard that I did previously, and I am very grateful for that. It's a good thing. Anyways, find your thing. Try to find your thing that would push you through that last mile of discomfort, so that you come out on the other side of the obstacles, whatever it is. And if you already know what it is, then please share it with the rest of us, because I would love to know what other people do to get through that thing. But this is the part where I run out of steam, so I'm just going to say thanks to everyone for hanging out with me on the commute, and thank you, Zane, for sending in the question. And I hope everyone has a lovely Friday and a great weekend, and I will see you next time. Bye.